A hush fell over the courtroom the moment the elegant woman walked in. Everyone had heard rumors about why she was there. Her husband's affair had been splashed across tabloids for weeks, yet no one was prepared for the thunderous impact of her presence. She cradled a prominent baby bump beneath a tailored dress, eyes fierce and resolute as she stepped up to the witness stand. The tension was palpable. Judges, lawyers, spectators, all locked onto this pregnant wife in rapt attention. Then, in a single delicate motion, she raised her left hand. With her sparkling wedding ring exposed, the mistress erupted into screams that rattled every heart in the room. Natalie Fairchild had grown up in the leafy suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, where the Mississippi River curved gently around winding roads and red brick houses. Her father, Robert Fairchild, was a well-known local entrepreneur who co-owned a chain of upscale grocery stores called Fairchild & Sons Market. Her mother, Linda, was a retired elementary school teacher who had cultivated in Natalie a spirit of generosity and empathy. From a young age, Natalie was taught to approach the world with both ambition and compassion. Natalie's childhood was almost fairy tale: perfect ponies on her birthdays, ski trips to Aspen in the winter, and a stable set of friends she met in private school. She was known for her warm smile and strong moral center. But it wasn't until she went to college that she realized the real world involved far more complexity and heartbreak than she ever expected. It was at Vanderbilt University where Natalie would meet her future husband, Christian Redwood. He was tall, charismatic, with a knack for business that seemed far beyond his years. Christian was the son of James Redwood, CEO of Redwood Industries, a conglomerate that spanned everything from real estate developments in Chicago to technology investments in Silicon Valley. Despite being an heir to a sizable fortune, Christian carried himself with an easy charm. He loved to sail, volunteer at local community centers, and was rumored to be the philanthropic star of the Redwood family, unlike some of his more ruthless relatives. The Redwood name had power, but Christian himself showed a benevolent side. Their relationship began quietly. They met during a charity function hosted by the university's business club to raise funds for underprivileged children. Christian, wearing a modest navy suit, listened intently as Natalie spoke about her volunteer experiences in her mother's old classroom. When they realized they both hailed from Minnesota, an immediate connection sparked. The night ended with them exchanging phone numbers and lingering in the warm glow of a campus lamppost, discussing everything from global economics to their favorite comfort foods. Friendship quickly turned into a romance. Christian became a fixture in Natalie's life. Daily calls, shared lectures, elaborate weekend getaways. After they graduated, Christian invited Natalie to meet his family in Redwood's sprawling mansion on the shores of Lake Minnetonka. She was shocked at the scale of their wealth: crystal chandeliers, a personal boathouse, and a stable of thoroughbred horses. Yet Christian's mother, the graceful but guarded Evelyn Redwood, welcomed Natalie with kind politeness. James Redwood, a more imposing figure, offered her a handshake and a cool inspection. Natalie left that evening feeling accepted yet subtly tested, as though she had to prove her worth in the Redwood world. But that only fueled her determination. She pursued her own career, as well, eventually carving out a niche as a financial analyst at Hamilton & Rhodes, a prestigious investment firm. Natalie thrived quickly, earning the respect of her co-workers and managers for her meticulous work ethic and innate strategic thinking. Meanwhile, Christian climbed the ladder at Redwood Industries, proving he wasn't just a trust fund kid, but a strategic asset in the company's expansion into new markets. Their love story culminated on a breezy summer evening when Christian proposed. a candlelit boat ride on Lake Minnetonka, a string quartet hidden aboard, and a diamond ring that sparkled with almost blinding clarity. Natalie said yes. They were married the following spring in a lavish ceremony held at St. Mark's Episcopal Church in downtown Minneapolis. The bride was radiant in a lace gown, the groom dashing in a bespoke tux, and local newspapers covered it as the social event of the year. Little did they know that this romantic fairy tale was sowing the seeds for an explosive drama that would play out in a public courtroom, capturing the state's and soon the nation's attention. Neither realized the extent to which fortune and ambition could invite shadows into their world, and neither expected that just months into their wedded bliss, a cunning mistress would emerge to unravel all they had built. Being married to a redwood came with an array of new responsibilities and pressures. Almost overnight, Natalie found herself on the boards of charities she'd only ever donated to in the past. Invitations to black-tie galas at the Minneapolis Institute of Art or corporate dinners at the top of the IDS Center building became regular occurrences. Every time she went out in public, cameras and gossip columns trailed behind. The Redwood name was recognized everywhere. Though it was overwhelming, Natalie adapted. She continued working full-time at Hamilton and Rhodes, determined not to lose herself in the Redwood identity. Christians supported her wholeheartedly, bragging about her intellect and strong spirit at Redwood Industries events. Despite managing busy professional lives, they carved out cherished personal time. Sunday brunch with her parents, cozy nights, watching Netflix, or escaping to their newly purchased cabin along the north shore of Lake Superior. Yet with wealth came complex social dynamics. Christian's father, James Redwood, was an old-school businessman who believed strongly in controlling public narratives and maintaining an unassailable Redwood reputation. Christian's mother, Evelyn, while kind to Natalie, held certain expectations about Redwood wives. They were to be social figures, philanthropic, yet impeccably groomed and always supportive of the Redwood business empire's image. Often, Natalie bristled under these unspoken rules. She wanted to forge her path and maintain independence, but the Redwood world was larger than life. Christian tried to shield her from the worst aspects of it: cutthroat boardroom rivalries, tabloids sniffing for scandal, and manipulative social climbers. Yet there was only so much he could do. Soon, the couple noticed tensions forming in Redwood Industries. As Christian advanced in the company, he stepped on the toes of more senior executives, notably a longtime family friend named Jared Holcroft, who was James Redwood's right-hand man. Jared was rumored to have eyes on the Redwood fortune himself. He had meticulously served James Redwood for years and hoped to rise to an executive position, if not become a shadow power behind Redwood Industries. Christian's popularity among younger employees threatened Jared's standing. Whispers circulated that Jared was digging for dirt on Christian, waiting for an opportunity to disgrace him publicly and maintain his own influence within the Redwood circle. During this time, Natalie felt an eerie sense that they were being watched. Strange paparazzi photos started surfacing her, leaving a coffee shop, Christian entering Redwood Industries late at night, the couple grocery shopping. Most were harmless, but as she and Christian's prominence rose, so did the tabloid interest. Familiar faces in philanthropic circles started acting cagey. Small rumors circulated about Christian's private life. Nothing substantial, but enough to unsettle Natalie. She trusted her husband, but the Redwood environment was rife with potential traps. Their life was not only professional juggling and public scrutiny. On the home front, they began talking about starting a family. Natalie had always wanted children. Christian, after initially hesitating, fearful of Redwood pressures on a child, relented happily once he imagined them as parents safe in a home filled with love. Everything seemed set for a bright future. Yet it was at this high point that the first cracks started to appear in the perfect facade. Christian began spending longer hours at Redwood Industries, consistently explaining he was closing big deals or handling an urgent crisis. Natalie believed him. Redwood was expanding aggressively into emerging markets, and Christian's mind for finance was in high demand. But some nights, she couldn't shake a gnawing suspicion. He came home later and later. He seemed more distant, as though something weighed on him. Whenever she asked what was wrong, he'd flash a weary smile and say, "Just work stress, Nat. We'll talk after I wrap this up." She tried to be patient. She tried to trust him. But the Redwood world was known to breed secrets. Her name was Laurel Townsend, a striking brunette with a sharp wit and a disarming smile. A newly hired consultant at Redwood Industries, she specialized in overseas licensing agreements. Laurel had a reputation for being persuasive, fearless in the boardroom and equally daring outside it. She had caught the eye of many executives, though few truly understood her ambitions. Natalie first heard about Laurel casually at a Redwood fundraiser. A colleague of Christian's mentioned that Laurel was an invaluable asset who'd quickly ingratiated herself with Redwood's top brass. It sounded like praise until the colleague added a sly remark. "She's got an eye for the powerful men in this company." The way the colleague said it, half gossip, half caution, made Natalie's stomach tighten. Over the following weeks, Laurel's name came up again and again. "She's so brilliant," Christian would say at home. "She just closed a massive deal in Singapore." Or Laurel found a major loophole in one of our property contracts. "She saved us millions." Natalie noticed Christian seemed impressed, maybe even enthralled by this rising star. But she refused to jump to conclusions. She respected her husband's boundaries and believed he was simply praising a talented co-worker. But rumors had a way of swirling in Redwood's high society circles. At a lavish holiday gala hosted at the Redwood Mansion, Natalie got her first chance to meet Laurel Townsend in person. The woman was undeniably beautiful, tall, graceful, with piercing gray eyes and a confidence that turned heads. She approached Natalie with a charming smile, complimented her on her emerald green gown, and engaged in small talk about Redwood Industries' philanthropic arms. Something in Laurel's gaze unsettled Natalie. It was as though Laurel was measuring her gleaming weaknesses. The conversation ended politely, but as Laurel sauntered away, a chill ran down Natalie's spine. In that split second, she had no definitive cause for alarm, but she felt an instinctive wariness. A few nights later, Christian came home far past midnight. He smelled faintly of expensive perfume. That was not his usual cologne. When Natalie questioned him, he shrugged it off as the scent of some Redwood executive's wife hugging him at a networking dinner. He seemed on edge, though. Tension brewed beneath the surface. He barely ate, dinner barely spoke, then collapsed into bed. Natalie lay awake, heart pounding with a gnawing anxiety she could no longer ignore. In the subsequent weeks, Christian's odd behavior intensified. He avoided eye contact, frequently claimed to be at urgent meetings, and left his phone face down at all times, carefully guarded. By now, Natalie had begun reading the subtext in Redwood circles. People whispered, "He's always with Laurel Townsend. They're quite the dynamic duo." In hushed corners, she caught glimpses of pitying looks aimed at her. Something was happening. She had to find out. One fateful evening, determined to quell her suspicions, Natalie visited Redwood Industries unannounced. She told her driver to drop her off near the side entrance, hoping to surprise Christian and perhaps drag him home for a decent meal. It was nearly 9 p.m., and the office was mostly deserted. She took the elevator to the executive floor and found Christian's office lights still on. But when she peered through the glass wall, no one was there. A faint glow shone from a nearby conference room. As Natalie approached, she heard low voices, muffled, intimate. Then she heard laughter, a woman's voice, Laurel's. Natalie's heart pounded in her ears. She hesitated, hand trembling on the doorknob. She debated barging in or retreating. Ultimately, she turned and fled, tears burning in her eyes. She didn't need to see them in a compromising position to confirm her deepest fears. But fear and heartbreak were only the beginning. The Redwood universe was a labyrinth of secrets, and Laurel Townsend was about to show just how cunning she could be. In the days that followed, Natalie confronted Christian. At first, he denied any wrongdoing. "Laurel and I are just working on deals," he insisted. But as Natalie pressed her eyes full of hurt, he finally admitted a partial truth. "We grew close. Yes, we had dinners. I was lonely and stressed, and she was there. But I swear, it's over. It was a mistake." Natalie's world shattered. She felt betrayed, humiliated, and confused. Christian pleaded for forgiveness. He apologized profusely, promising to cut ties with Laurel. He blamed the Redwood environment, the intense pressure from James Redwood, his own insecurities. For a brief moment, Natalie considered leaving him altogether. Yet memories of their love, their wedding vows, and their dreams for a family weighed heavily in her heart. She told him she needed proof that this affair was truly over and demanded he see a marriage counselor with her. He agreed, desperate to salvage their relationship. Initially, it seemed like they might find a path to healing. Christian broke off contact with Laurel outside of unavoidable business meetings, agreed to switch departments within Redwood Industries to avoid direct collaboration, and tried to rekindle the warmth they once had. He even took Natalie on a spontaneous weekend getaway to their North Shore cabin, where they spent hours talking about how to rebuild trust. But Laurel Townsend was not a woman to be easily discarded. She continued to lurk around Redwood's offices and corporate events, sometimes cornering Christian in the hall with urgent business matters, or texting him under the guise of necessary clarifications for ongoing deals. Christian claimed he tried to set boundaries, but Laurel was persistent, and the Redwood environment thrived on drama. One morning, Natalie woke feeling unusually lightheaded. She had been dealing with bouts of nausea for a few days. Initially, she blamed stress, but something deep inside her urged her to take a pregnancy test. Trembling with cautious hope, she waited in the bathroom of their penthouse condo for the results. The test turned positive. Tears of joy and trepidation flooded her eyes. She was carrying Christian's child. The news shifted everything. Despite the affair, despite the lingering mistrust, the reality of a baby changed the dynamic between husband and wife. Christian was overjoyed, or at least appeared so. He vowed once more to focus on family, to be the husband and father they deserved. In a private conversation, he admitted his regret over ever letting Laurel get close. For a few weeks, it felt as though the Redwood storms had calmed. Natalie allowed herself a fragile sense of hope, imagining a future where the affair was a distant memory overshadowed by the joys of parenthood. They began preparing for the baby shopping, for cribs, planning a small nursery in their condo, daydreaming about family vacations. Yet behind the scenes, the Redwood machine continued to churn. Rumors reached Natalie's ears. Laurel wasn't just scorned, she was furious. She told close associates that Christian had promised her certain positions, and that she had personal stakes in Redwood deals. Worse yet, she began dropping unsubtle hints in Redwood's social circles that she and Christian had something deeper than a fling. And then came the bombshell. Laurel filed a lawsuit claiming breach of contract and sexual exploitation, insisting that Christian Redwood had used her professionally and then cast her aside. She threatened to expose incriminating evidence that would destroy his reputation and possibly Redwood Industries. She sought not only damages, but also the Redwood name, implying that Christian had promised her a future together. That was how Natalie found herself just barely into her second trimester, standing by Christian as they prepared to face Laurel Townsend in court. The Redwood family, blindsided by the scandal, pressured Christian to settle out of court. James Redwood in particular wanted no part in a public trial that could damage Redwood Industries' brand. But Laurel refused settlement offers. She wanted revenge, or perhaps she wanted more than money. The stage was set for a sensational legal showdown. Paparazzi camped outside Redwood's offices, the Fairchild family home, and the Redwood estate. News headlines labeled the case the Redwood Affair, with tabloids speculating on lurid details. Law firms across Minneapolis salivated at the high-profile nature of the case. Ultimately, Christian and Natalie secured representation from Anderson and Brooks, an elite firm known for crisis management. Laurel hired the equally formidable Williams and Dresden, rumored to relish taking down wealthy executives. It all led to that fateful day in the Hennepin County Courthouse. Natalie, her pregnancy more apparent each day, would sit behind Christian in the courtroom, supporting him while grappling with her own pain. Across the aisle, Laurel Townsend, impeccably dressed, wearing an air of confidence, would spin a tale of betrayal and broken promises. The Redwood name, the Fairchild name, their unborn child's future, everything teetered on the outcome of this trial. The trial began under a media frenzy. Cameras flashed incessantly as Christian, Natalie, and their lawyers arrived each morning. News vans lined the streets. Commentators speculated about the Redwood fortune, the scandal's impact on Redwood Industries' stock price, and the human drama unfolding in real time. Judge Marilyn Simmons, a stern yet fair-minded veteran of the bench, presided over the case. She wasted no time establishing order. "We will not turn my courtroom into a spectacle for the tabloids," she warned, scowling at the crowd of onlookers. Nonetheless, the rows behind them were packed with curious spectators, local and national press, and even a few Redwood Industries board members. On the left side sat Laurel Townsend, her lawyers, and a handful of supporters who occasionally offered her tissues or whispered encouragements. On the right side, Christian Redwood, flanked by attorneys from Anderson and Brooks, with Natalie sitting solemnly in the first row. The opening arguments were explosive. Laurel's lead attorney, Grace Dresden, painted a vivid portrait of Laurel as a hard-working, brilliant consultant who had been manipulated by a powerful Redwood heir. Dresden spoke of broken promises, both professional and personal, and even hinted at alleged emotional abuse. She described Laurel as a victim who had risked her career in trusting Christian Redwood. Christian's attorney, Michael Brooks, countered by emphasizing Laurel's calculating nature. He described her as an opportunist who used personal relationships to leverage a professional advantage, seeking to blackmail Christian when she didn't get her way. He vowed to introduce evidence showing Laurel Townsend had a pattern of climbing the corporate ladder through personal entanglements. The tension in the courtroom was palpable. As the trial progressed, Redwood and Townsend's colleagues were called to testify. Some supported Laurel's account, claiming they witnessed flirtatious or romantic interactions well beyond a typical workplace relationship. Others defended Christian, emphasizing his strong moral character and painting Laurel as an instigator. James Redwood, despite his reluctance, took the stand. He offered carefully crafted answers to avoid damaging Redwood Industries' image, but his frustration with Laurel was apparent. Evelyn Redwood, Christian's mother, was noticeably absent from proceedings, feigning illness to avoid the public spotlight. Meanwhile, the Redwood legal team tried to keep Natalie off the stand, citing her pregnancy and the emotional strain. But Laurel's lawyers insisted that Natalie's testimony was critical, as she was a direct witness to the aftermath of their affair. The judge agreed, and Natalie was scheduled to testify near the trial's climax. During breaks, the Redwood attorneys often huddled in corners, strategizing. Natalie remained mostly silent, her hands protectively resting on her growing belly. She was physically and emotionally exhausted, torn between supporting Christian in public and wrestling with her private hurt. A swirl of emotions kept her up at night: anger, betrayal, but also love and the hope for a stable family for her child. Then, halfway through the trial, an unsealed document from Redwood Industries was leaked. Tabloids ran sensational headlines: Redwood Empire in jeopardy. The document hinted that Redwood Industries' overseas expansion deals had irregularities, something Laurel claimed Christian had orchestrated. Christian and his attorneys labeled it a smear tactic, but the damage was done. Public opinion began tilting, with many observers starting to see Laurel as a whistleblower rather than a jilted mistress. James Redwood demanded a more aggressive approach. He berated Christian in private. "Settle this, or we'll watch Redwood Industries crumble," he barked. But Laurel was beyond monetary offers now. She wanted a dramatic public victory. She wanted Christian, and by extension, Redwood's power structure, exposed for personal and professional wrongs. A sense of impending climax hung over the courthouse. Everyone felt it. A major revelation was around the corner. Reporters speculated about secret evidence. Redwood board members whispered about new, scandalous developments. Through it all, Natalie remained resolute, determined to find the truth for her own peace of mind, for the child growing inside her, and for the vow she once made to stand by Christian through good times and bad. The day that changed everything arrived without fanfare. The morning was crisp, with a gray sky threatening rain. Outside the courthouse, throngs of reporters jostled for position. Inside, the corridors buzzed with heightened tension. Observers packed into the courtroom, anticipating a pivotal turn in the proceedings. Court resumed with Laurel Townsend on the witness stand for cross-examination. Christian's attorney, Michael Brooks, began calmly but firmly, recounting text messages and emails that suggested Laurel, not Christian, had initiated much of the personal interaction. He produced records that contradicted some of her earlier statements. Laurel's facade wavered, but didn't crumble. She shifted explanations, painting Christian as the manipulative mastermind. On more than one occasion, the judge scolded both sides for argumentative questioning. Everyone's anticipation peaked when it was finally Natalie's turn to testify. She walked to the stand, the hush in the courtroom almost reverent. She took her oath, placed her hand on the Bible, and met Judge Simmons' gaze with quiet determination. Her baby bump, now unmistakable, served as a visual reminder of the stakes beyond mere corporate scandal. Laurel's attorney, Grace Dresden, approached first. "Mrs. Redwood, could you tell the court the state of your marriage around the time Ms. Townsend began consulting at Redwood Industries?" The question was spoken gently, yet laced with implications. Natalie inhaled. "We were happy but busy," she replied softly. "Christian was working long hours. I noticed a strain, but I didn't realize how serious it was until everything came out. Dresden pried further. And is it true that when you found out about your husband's relationship with Miss Townsend, you confronted him, and he initially denied it? Natalie nodded, tears welling. Yes, he did. Then he admitted he'd been unfaithful. He said he ended it, that it was a mistake. The emotion in her voice pulled at many observers' hearts. Cameras flashed from the gallery. After several more probing questions, Dresden finally tried to corner her. Mrs. Redwood, can you confirm that your husband leveraged Redwood Industries' resources and used Ms. Townsend's professional ambitions to lure her into an affair? Natalie stiffened. I was not present in their professional dealings, so I can't confirm that. I only know what my husband told me, that he made a terrible personal mistake. I've never seen any evidence he forced or coerced Ms. Townsend in business or anything else. Despite Laurel's attorney's best efforts, Natalie remained composed, refusing to support the narrative of Christian as a master manipulator. She admitted Christian's wrongdoing, but did not expand it to match Laurel's claims. By the time Dresden ended her questioning, a murmur spread through the courtroom. Natalie's testimony was emotional, but also somewhat exonerating. Then came the Redwood team's turn to question her. Michael Brooks asked her about the timeline, how Christian confessed how he tried to repair the marriage, and how the Redwood family responded. Natalie answered honestly, describing the heartbreak, but also Christian's attempts to make amends. The Redwood side seemed to gain momentum. Public sympathy, at least in the courtroom, began shifting in Christian's favor. All the while, Laurel watched with a steely expression. She fidgeted at the counsel's table, occasionally whispering to Grace Dresden. The tension was nearing its breaking point. Just as Natalie was about to leave the stand, the Redwood attorney signaled one final question. Mrs. Redwood, you mentioned your pregnancy. How far along are you? 6 months, Natalie replied, her voice trembling slightly. We're expecting our child in just a few months. A hush fell over the room. Then it happened. Natalie lifted her left hand, on which gleamed a large, exquisite diamond ring, her wedding ring. She held it almost absent-mindedly against her belly as she addressed the attorney. Yet that small gesture, her wedding ring next to her prominent baby bump, was iconic. It was a silent declaration of her legitimacy, her unwavering stance as the rightful wife, the soon-to-be mother of Christian Redwood's heir. An electric pause crackled through the air. Then the unthinkable occurred. Laurel Townsend suddenly stood, her face contorted with fury. She pointed at Natalie, her voice ringing out. You don't get to stand there and flaunt that ring like you own everything. Laurel's scream sliced through the courtroom. He told me he'd leave you. He told me I'd be the one at his side. Spectators gasped. Judge Simmons hammered her gavel. But Laurel couldn't stop. She seemed possessed by rage, screaming about how Christian had lied to her, how Natalie was smug, how Redwood had promised her more than just an affair. It was a chilling, raw outburst that left everyone stunned. The bailiff rushed forward to contain Laurel, urging her to sit. Grace Dresden, momentarily stunned, tried to calm her client. But Laurel was in the throes of an emotional explosion years in the making. She flung accusation after accusation at Christian. You promised me a future. You said you'd marry me if I helped with those deals. She lurched toward the bench, ignoring the gavel's thunder. And you, Natalie, acting so righteous, pretending like you're some victim? This was all about Redwood money and power. Reporters in the gallery scribbled furiously, capturing every frantic word. Security finally coaxed Laurel back into her seat, though her eyes blazed with indignation. For a moment, the entire courtroom was still reeling from the intensity of the meltdown. Judge Simmons, regaining composure, addressed Laurel Townsend with a stern glare. Ms. Townsend, any further outbursts and I will hold you in contempt." She rapped the gavel again. "Order, I need order in this courtroom." The mistress's sudden eruption was both a revelation and a turning point. Her raw emotion undermined the carefully constructed image she'd maintained throughout the trial. Up to that moment, she'd presented herself as a poised, victimized professional. Now she appeared frantic, scorned, and vindictive, and the fact that it was triggered by the sight of Natalie's ring and pregnancy left a potent impression. As tension simmered, Grace Dresden whispered urgently to Laurel, who was still breathing heavily. Laurel snapped her gaze away, folding her arms defiantly. Across the aisle, Christian remained stone-faced. Natalie, though, shaken, maintained her composure, a hand over her baby bump. Michael Brooks subtly gestured to Christian that this outburst could be a break in their favor. Once the courtroom settled, the judge dismissed the day's proceedings early, stating that everyone needed time to collect themselves and that the lawyers should confer about next steps. Reporters rushed out to file breaking news reports. The Redwood lawyers retreated to a conference room to strategize. Laurel, accompanied by her legal team, left the courthouse in near hysterics, bombarded by paparazzi questions. Back at home, Natalie sat in their living room, emotionally drained, reeling from the spectacle. Christian tried to comfort her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Natalie, I'm so sorry," he murmured. "I never wanted any of this." She shook her head, tears trailing down her cheeks. "It's done now. We have to face the consequences." Despite her bitterness, she felt an odd sense of relief. Perhaps Laurel's meltdown would finally reveal the truth. That evening, James Redwood called Christian, practically shouting through the phone. "Your fiasco is humiliating the family. End this, Christian. End it now, or Redwood Industries will suffer beyond repair." Christian had no illusions. James Redwood's priority was the corporation's image, not his son's emotional well-being. But Christian was beyond placating. The trial was nearing conclusion, and Laurel's meltdown had changed everything. The Redwood lawyers were convinced they could either dismiss the case or win it outright. The atmosphere outside the courthouse was a mixture of disbelief and thrill. Cameras replayed Laurel Townsend's courtroom outburst on every news station. Talk show hosts debated whether it was the raw emotion of a wronged woman or the meltdown of someone caught in her own deception. But within the Redwood camp, something else stirred, something more sinister than anyone had anticipated. The morning after the incident, Christian sat across from his legal team in a high-rise conference room overlooking downtown Minneapolis. Michael Brooks, his lead attorney, reviewed newly surfaced documents with a furrowed brow. "We may have more than we bargained for," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "These aren't just emotional tirades anymore. We have a sabotage conspiracy on our hands." The revelation came through a routine systems audit conducted by Redwood Industries' cybersecurity team. In light of the lawsuit, the team had been scouring internal emails and communication logs for damage control. What they found were private exchanges between Laurel Townsend and Jared Holcroft. James Redwood's longtime confidant and a man many suspected had ambitions beyond loyalty. The messages were damning. Laurel had been feeding Jared updates about her interactions with Christian, strategizing how to make him vulnerable. The tone wasn't of love or heartbreak, but of calculated manipulation. In one message, Laurel wrote, "He's soft when it comes to guilt. If I time this right, the fallout will push him out of Redwood for good, and you'll have your chance." Another message showed Jared responding, "Perfect. Keep him distracted. If Redwood Industries votes him out, the board will look to me." Christian stared at the printed transcripts, his fists tightening around the armrest of his chair. "So I wasn't just stupid," he said under his breath. I was a pawn. Michael nodded. This changes the case. Laurel didn't just sue you out of vengeance. She was part of a coordinated effort to oust you and elevate Jared. It's corporate warfare. The Redwood legal team moved fast. Within 24 hours, a motion was filed to admit the new evidence into the official court record. The judge approved it, setting the stage for a final courtroom crescendo. When the trial resumed, the courtroom was tense with expectation. Gone was the veneer of sympathy for Laurel. Even her own legal team appeared disoriented. Grace Dresden attempted to regroup, but the emotional high ground Laurel had relied on was crumbling beneath her. Michael Brooks stood to deliver the bombshell. "Your Honor," he began, voice cool and measured, "we present to the court evidence of a premeditated effort by Ms. Townsend and Mr. Jared Holcroft to undermine Christian Redwood's role in Redwood Industries." These messages, he held them up for the jury to see clearly, indicate that Ms. Townsend's lawsuit is not an act of justice, but one of vengeance and manipulation engineered to destabilize a major corporation. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. Laurel paled. Her fingers curled into the edge of the table as though it were the only thing keeping her from collapsing. Her lawyer jumped up. "Objection. Character assassination without full context." But Judge Simmons, who had endured weeks of high drama, leaned forward, peering over her glasses. "I've reviewed the messages. The objection is overruled." Christian watched Laurel, his jaw set. She avoided his eyes. Then came Natalie's unexpected entrance. She had not been scheduled to testify again, but the Redwood team requested her for rebuttal commentary. As she walked back to the witness stand, the courtroom fell into silence. Her presence, radiant yet exhausted, belly round and hands steady, had become symbolic. This wasn't just a corporate scandal. This was about lives torn apart, futures hanging in the balance. Mrs. Redwood Michael asked gently, after seeing these messages between Ms. Townsend and Mr. Holcroft, "How do you feel about the narrative that's been presented these past weeks?" Natalie took a long breath before speaking. "I feel like my family was used, like our pain was part of someone else's ambition. I always suspected there was more going on, but I never imagined how deep it ran." Michael continued, "Do you believe Christian was manipulated?" Her voice trembled, but she didn't waver. "Yes. He made mistakes. He betrayed me. But I also see now that he wasn't the only one playing a role. Laurel and Jared, they played us all." The courtroom murmured again. This time the sympathy was palpable and directed at Natalie. When Laurel was called to address the newly revealed evidence, she looked every bit the unraveling figure. Gone was her poise. Her voice cracked. Jared told me Christian would ruin me if I didn't fight back. He said Christian was the real threat, not me. He manipulated me too." But her words landed with a hollow thud. The jury had heard enough. The public had seen the meltdown, the messages, the contradictions. Even her once formidable attorney looked deflated. Outside the courthouse, the mood had shifted entirely. Reporters swarmed Christian and Natalie, their tone now supportive. "Mrs. Redwood, do you feel justice is close?" one asked. Natalie responded with rare resolve. "Justice doesn't erase what's been lost, but it's a start." Christian added, "We're grateful the truth is coming out. We'll face whatever comes next together." Back in their penthouse that night, the mood was sober. Christian poured a glass of water and sat beside Natalie on the couch. "I don't deserve your grace," he said softly. "You don't," Natalie replied, eyes steady. "But you're getting it for our child's sake. And because somewhere in all this madness, I believe you still want to be better." He reached for her hand. This time, she didn't pull away. The final day of court loomed. Everyone knew the verdict was near. But no matter the jury's conclusion, one thing was certain: the Redwood legacy had already been rewritten. And for Natalie, the most powerful chapter was yet to be lived. The final day of the trial dawned grey and overcast, as if the skies themselves understood the weight of what was to come. Outside the Hennepin County Courthouse, a sea of reporters had gathered their breath, steaming in the cold morning air. Some had camped out since before sunrise, huddled in makeshift tents, clutching cameras and microphones, desperate to be the first to capture the verdict in what had become the most sensational trial in Minnesota in over a decade. Inside the courtroom was electric with tension. Every seat was filled. Observers included legal analysts, Redwood Industries board members, and curious locals who had managed to secure public access. A few even whispered that a Netflix producer had been spotted in the back row, scouting for a docudrama opportunity. Natalie sat in the front row behind Christian, now visibly 7 months pregnant. Her face was pale, but composed, her hands resting gently on her belly. She wore a soft blue maternity dress that made her look both regal and vulnerable, a living symbol of everything at stake. Christian sat in front of her, clad in a tailored charcoal suit, his expression solemn but determined. Across the aisle, Laurel Townsend looked nothing like the confident woman who had once strutted into Redwood Industries with ambition in her eyes. She wore a black blazer and simple blouse, her makeup understated her posture stiff. Her once flawless image had unraveled in recent days, and even her own legal team appeared subdued. Grace Dresden shuffled papers quietly, avoiding eye contact with the press. Judge Marilyn Simmons entered the courtroom to a standing hush. She glanced briefly at both parties, her expression unreadable, before nodding to the bailiff. "Bring in the jury." 12 men and women filed in each one, carrying the weight of days of testimony, evidence, and explosive revelations. Their faces were stoic, giving away nothing. Natalie held her breath. The judge turned to the foreperson. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The woman, a middle-aged nurse named Diane Koenig, stood. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." She handed a sheet of paper to the bailiff, who delivered it to the judge. Judge Simmons read silently, then handed the paper back. In the matter of Laurel Townsend versus Christian Redwood and Redwood Industries, the foreperson began, voice clear, "We find in favor of the defendant on all major counts." A stunned silence fell over the room. Natalie exhaled her chest, rising as if she had been holding her breath for weeks. Christian slowly turned to look at her, his eyes red-rimmed with emotion. She nodded once, just enough to acknowledge his gaze, but not enough to forget everything they had endured. Laurel slumped in her chair, her face drained of color. A single tear slid down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. Grace Dresden placed a comforting hand on her client's shoulder, but it was clear the battle was lost. Judge Simmons brought the gavel down with finality. Court is adjourned. As murmurs filled the courtroom, the Redwood legal team exchanged handshakes and whispered congratulations. Michael Brooks placed a reassuring hand on Christian's shoulder. "It's over," he said. "You made it." Christian didn't smile. He turned to Natalie instead. "Thank you for standing by me," he whispered. Natalie stood slowly. "Let's just go home," she replied, her voice flat. "There's a lot more than this courtroom we still have to fix." Outside, the media frenzy erupted. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters swarmed, shoving microphones into faces. "Mr. Redwood, how do you feel about the verdict? Do you plan to pursue legal action against Laurel Townsend, Mrs. Redwood? What message do you have for women going through betrayal?" Natalie stopped briefly, her eyes scanning the crowd. "The truth eventually finds its way," she said quietly. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came for clarity." Christian said little. He shielded Natalie with his body as they were guided to a waiting car. The door slammed shut behind them, and for the first time in weeks, there was silence. In the car, Natalie turned toward the window, watching the courthouse fade into the distance. "You know this isn't the end," she said after a moment. "For the media, maybe, but for us, this is just a beginning." Christian nodded. "I know. I don't expect forgiveness, Nat, but I want to earn it. For you. For the baby." She looked down at her belly. "Then you better be ready, because I won't raise a child in a home built on lies." That night, Redwood Industries released a public statement emphasizing the company's commitment to transparency and distancing itself from the personal failings of any one executive. They confirmed that Jared Holcroft had been terminated for his involvement in corporate sabotage and that internal ethics reforms were already underway. The statement was precise and cold, classic James Redwood strategy. James himself called Christian late that evening. "Well done," he said tersely. "You salvaged the family name. I trust you understand what must happen next." Christian's jaw tightened. "You mean working 20-hour days to scrub your legacy clean?" "I mean repairing what you nearly destroyed," James growled. "This company was never about just you." Christian didn't argue. He simply ended the call. His father's voice was no longer a compass he wanted to follow. As the media moved on to the next scandal, Laurel Townsend became a cautionary tale. She withdrew her appeal. Rumors swirled that she had fled to New York, possibly working under a new name. Her former circle of admirers faded, replaced by wary acquaintances and polite distance. The Redwood family, meanwhile, filed a civil suit for defamation and conspiracy, though it was widely expected to be settled quietly. The message had already been sent. Crossing a Redwood came with consequences. In the weeks that followed, Natalie took a leave of absence from Hamilton and Rhodes. She needed space to breathe, to prepare for motherhood, and to decide whether her future included Christian. They spent their days in counseling, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in long silences. Christian attended every session. He no longer tried to fix things with flowers or gifts. He simply showed up and told the truth. And it was in one of those sessions, as spring crept back into the world and the weight of the trial began to lift, that Natalie spoke the words he'd been praying to hear. "I'm not ready to forget," she said softly, "but I'm willing to try again, for our child. And because somewhere deep down, I still believe in the man I married." They held each other, then not in passion, but in fragile forgiveness. 2 months later, Natalie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Robert James Redwood. Robert, after her father James, after Christian's, a symbolic bridge between legacies torn apart and slowly mending. When Christian held his son for the first time, tears streamed down his face. "I'll never let you down," he whispered. "I'll never let either of you down again." And Natalie believed him. Not because he promised, but because this time she saw the man behind the Redwood name, the man who had fallen, confessed, and chosen to rise again. In the weeks following the verdict, life in the Redwood household was a whirlwind of readjustment. Christian's reputation, though publicly vindicated, was scarred. Privately, he struggled with guilt, grappling with the knowledge that he had nearly destroyed his marriage and public image. James Redwood, while relieved about Redwood Industries' survival, remained icy, insisting Christian must now work tirelessly to repair Redwood's brand. Natalie, still processing the trauma of betrayal, the stress of the trial, and her upcoming motherhood, took an extended leave from her job at Hamilton and Rhodes. She spent her days reflecting on what her future should look like. She no longer trusted the Redwood name blindly, nor her husband entirely. But she still loved Christian especially seeing how genuinely remorseful he was. They agreed to continue couples therapy, focusing on healing the wounds. She also set boundaries with the Redwood family, making it clear her role as a wife and mother did not mean she would bend to Redwood Industries' demands. In a private ceremony attended by close friends and family, Christian and Natalie reaffirmed their vows. It was not a public spectacle, just a simple blessing by a local pastor in the garden of a friend's estate. No paparazzi, no Redwood board members, no business associates. Natalie wore a simple maternity dress, her belly a gentle curve beneath the floral fabric, and Christian stood beside her, tears in his eyes, quietly vowing to be faithful and supportive. 2 months later, their baby boy arrived. They named him Robert James Redwood Robert, after Natalie's father, and James after Christian's father, bridging the two families despite the tension that lingered. Holding their newborn son was a moment of pure love and redemption for Natalie. In that instant, she realized that while the Redwood Empire might be fraught with darkness, her family's future was hers to shape. Laurel Townsend slipped from public view. Rumors circulated about her leaving Minnesota. Some said she moved to New York for a fresh start, perhaps changed her name. Jared Holcroft likewise disappeared from Redwood's ranks, presumably plotting his next venture elsewhere. The Redwood Empire weathered the scandal, forging ahead with expansions and philanthropic events, their name too entrenched to fail from one affair. On many evenings, Natalie would walk through the nursery, gently rocking baby Robert in her arms. She stared at the ring on her finger, remembering the day she raised it in court, the mistress's screams ringing in her ears, a swirl of heartbreak and triumph, heartbreak and growth. She still had battles to fight, rebuilding trust, finding her own identity outside Redwood's shadow. But for now, she found solace in the quiet rhythm of her child's breathing and the knowledge that she had survived the storm, determined to stand tall. Life rarely follows a neat script. Scars remain, and healing takes courage. Natalie and Christian Redwood discovered that wealth and power bring heavy burdens, but beneath the glare of the public eye, they chose to rebuild. Their story reminds us that even the most stunning ring can't protect a marriage from deception, but neither must betrayal define one's future. It takes honesty, accountability, and real effort to mend what's broken, and with love, it's possible. If you found this story gripping, full of drama, twists, and hope in the face of heartbreak, please support our channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your engagement helps us bring you more stories that illuminate the human condition, from scandalous court cases to inspiring tales of redemption. We value each and every one of you. Until next time, keep believing in second chances and the resilience of the human heart. Thank you for watching.